They say defending your life is a battle in itself. But imagine facing 20-plus assassination attempts over 7 years and still standing. Tonight, we tell you the dramatic, true story of Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's military-turned-political leader, whose journey from battlefield to presidency has been marked with danger, betrayal, power plays, and a fierce struggle for sovereignty. This is not just a story about one man's survival. It's a window into how African politics are colliding with global interests, how the United States is reshaping its posture across the continent, and how the struggle for freedom, political, economic, and existential, is playing out on 2 continents. Stay with me. We begin in Africa, then cross to the US, draw comparisons, and close with a message for every citizen who values freedom. The sun hovered low over Ouagadougou the evening of April 16, 2025, casting long shadows into a tension-filled city. In the corridors of the presidential palace, alarms blared. Reports came in. A conspiracy to eliminate Captain Ibrahim Traoré had been uncovered as scores of military officers, foreign actors, and internal collaborators allegedly participated. The attempt, they said, involved 119 individuals according to some investigations. San Francisco Bay View +4. This was not new. Since seizing power in September 2022 in a coup that removed Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba, Traoré's life has been under a near-constant shadow of threat. He has survived at least 18 assassination attempts, in some accounts over 20. Modern Ghana +5. One plot allegedly targeted his own guards, bribed with millions of dollars to betray him. Another plan purportedly involved traitors across the armed forces, some aided by foreign intelligence or neighboring nations. YouTube +5. YouTube +4. Yet every time, Traoré emerged wounded in spirit perhaps, but alive and more resolute. Why so many attempts? Because Traoré is among the most emblematic faces of a new wave of African assertiveness. He has challenged long-standing relationships with Western powers, especially France, nationalized certain mining operations, strengthened regional alliances, and positioned himself as a symbol of Pan-African resistance to foreign interference. This day live +4. Traoré's survival is not just about luck or security protocols. It is also a story of political identity, of the tangled webs of loyalty and betrayal in Sahel-era African politics, and of how one life can become the battleground for global interests. Let's now journey deeper into the African side of this drama, the geostrategic realities, regional dynamics, and the challenge facing leaders like Traoré. From West Africa to the Sahel, the struggle for security is an everyday reality. Islamist insurgencies, jihadist groups, trafficking networks, coups, and regional fragmentation are part of the battle. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. All have undergone military transitions in the last few years. Many see their actions as pushing back against failed democratic models and foreign dependence. Traoré, after overthrowing Damiba, declared he would chart a new path, one that prioritized national sovereignty, economic self-development, and regional coordination. But doing so puts you in direct conflict with entrenched interests. In many cases, those interests lie outside Africa. Foreign powers, mining companies, and intelligence services have long been deeply entangled in Sahel politics. For a leader who openly critiques them, the danger is obvious. Take one recent plot, the assassination plan that allegedly involved actors in Ivory Coast. The conspirators, caught in the act, reportedly fled to Ivory Coast where they found shelter rather than punishment. That act of tacit complicity raised questions about whether neighboring states had roles in targeting Traoré. YouTube +2. Observers argue that Traoré's fate is inseparable from the old colonial legacies still alive in Africa. Leaders who push for resource nationalism, who challenge foreign military bases, or who defy debt arrangements often find themselves in peril. This day live +2. Perhaps that is the irony: you seize power by force, only to have your life threatened by forces inside and outside your own country. But there are shifts underway. In mid-2025, the United States helped broker a peace agreement between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda, signed in Washington, D.C., which promises troop withdrawals and regional security coordination. The United States, meanwhile, is recalibrating its Africa policy, as U.S. Special Advisor Massoud Boulos states that the approach now rests on peace, partnerships, and prosperity. Wikipedia. Le Monde.fr Yet this recalibration has tensions. The expiration of the AGOA trade agreement means African countries are now reeling from tariffs reimposed on exports to the US. Many argue this undercuts the credibility of American engagement. Meanwhile, African leaders like Zambia's president have publicly claimed the cuts to US aid are overdue and called for self-reliance. The Washington Post +3. Financial Times. In parallel, some governments have deepened ties with China and Russia to balance US influence. The Sahel region increasingly sees foreign involvement from multiple directions. For Burkina Faso and Traoré, this means both risk and opportunity. He must navigate alliances without compromising sovereignty. At the same time, internal challenges inside Burkina Faso, economic stress, food security, displacement, climate, legitimacy, continuously test Traoré's standing. He must not only survive physically, but politically. Now, shifting the lens, let's turn to the United States, where the stakes are global, the strategy's ambitious, and the tensions internal and external. The U.S. under the Trump administration in 2025 is actively reimagining its approach to Africa. Analysts argue the new blueprint is transactional, trade, resource access, and security partnerships, not ideological or aid-driven frameworks. The expiration of AGOA, for instance, is a moment of reckoning. It signals that trade preferences are no longer guaranteed. Brookings +3. The Washington Post +2. U.S. officials emphasize that Africa's untapped potential and mineral wealth make it a strategic battleground between Washington, Beijing, Moscow, and others. In this worldview, African leaders like Traoré become invaluable partners if they can commit to deals beneficial to U.S. interests. Brookings +2. Domestically, the U.S. is facing its own existential crises: rising polarization, economic stress, immigration debates, institutional wear and tear. The foreign policy machinery is under pressure to deliver results. The U.S. is also reshaping refugee policy. An example is the White South African Refugee Program, initiated in 2025, granting expedited asylum to white South African farmers amid claims, widely contested, of persecution. The move triggered diplomatic backlash in South Africa and criticism for its racial overtones. Wikipedia. The Guardian. Beyond Africa policy, U.S. influence in global institutions is shifting. The U.S. has pulled back funding from UNESCO and threatens withdrawal, citing objections to woke, divisive agendas. Meanwhile, with UN peacekeeping facing a 25% cut following U.S. financial contraction, missions in Congo, South Sudan, Somalia, and elsewhere face scaling back. Reuters. AP News. On the U.S. home front, political narratives use Africa as both an opportunity and a foil, to show global leadership and to stoke competition narratives, e.g., with China. At the same time, many Americans remain detached. Media often ignores significant African stories. As one commentary observed, the problem isn't even that our journalists discuss Africa badly. It's that they don't bother to discuss Africa at all. Currentaffairs.org. Thus, the U.S. foreign policy apparatus confronts a dual challenge: projecting authority abroad while remaining functional at home. Comparison: Africa versus USA, two theaters of conflict, two kinds of struggle. At first glance, Traoré's story and American strategic posture seem worlds apart. But the parallels are striking. Survival versus projection: in Africa, survival is the baseline. Leaders like Traoré must first survive physically and politically. In the U.S., leadership involves projecting power abroad while containing domestic instability. Both require careful balancing of internal and external forces. Sovereignty versus influence: Traoré's core battle is for national sovereignty to control resources, foreign relationships, and strategic direction. The U.S., by contrast, seeks influence over trade, alliances, resources, and diplomatic outcomes. Risk versus reward. In Burkina Faso, a failed attempt can end your life or tenure. In America, missteps in foreign policy risk reputation, leverage, or global credibility, but rarely immediate physical peril. Message and symbolism: Traoré is a potent symbol that one man can resist external pressures, that Africa can reclaim agency. The U.S., too, often brands its foreign policy as a moral choice: freedom, democracy, prosperity, even if the underlying methods are realist or transactional. Debt, aid, and dependency. Traoré fights dependence on loans, conditional aid, foreign military bases. The U.S. has turned away from unconditional aid, preferring deals with strings, sometimes retracting benefits like AGOA when domestic priorities shift. Geopolitical competition. Africa is the new pawn board. The U.S. sees the continent as terrain for influence, just as Traoré sees his country as terrain for sovereignty. The conflict between these views leads directly to targeted pressure, interference, and, yes, assassination plots. What stands out is how asymmetry defines the stakes. For Traoré, every policy shift or foreign deal might invite deadly retribution. For the U.S., shifts in partnership or trade deals create diplomatic ripple effects, but rarely existential cost to individual lives. Yet both must answer, is the cost worth the claim? Can sovereignty and influence coexist? Can leadership balance moral aspiration with realpolitik? Let's return to Traoré's 7-year battle for freedom and ask, what does survival look like? Resilience under fire. Each time an attempt failed, Traoré did not retrench. Instead, he tightened security, exposed conspiracies, and leaned toward populist and nationalist rhetoric to galvanize loyalty. YouTube +4. Institutional control. He repositioned the military, replaced compromised commanders, formed elite units loyal to his vision. Messaging and symbolism. In each public appearance, he portrays calm, resolve, humility. Surviving an attack becomes part of the narrative, a testament to destiny, not luck. Regional alliances. He seeks support from other Sahel leaders, sees joint security pacts, and frames Burkina Faso's independence as part of a broader African resurgence. Negotiation with foreign powers. Traoré cannot close all doors. He still must negotiate trade, diplomacy, and security with external actors, but on his terms where possible. Through this, he transforms attempts on his life into political capital. His survival becomes credibility. Now, what about the US in 2025? What does its battle for influence look like? Revised diplomacy, strong-arming coalitions, renegotiating trade agreements, deploying selective aid, and using military presence only where strategically vital. Strategic pivots. In Africa, reprioritizing minerals, youth markets, tech partnerships, security cooperation against terrorism. Domestic constraints, congressional gridlock, budget limitations, allied pushback, ideological polarization. All have to be managed. Image and soft power. The U.S. still uses narratives of freedom, democracy, and rule of law, but its actual policies increasingly reflect transactional interests. Institutional retrenchment, pullbacks from UN bodies, cuts in foreign aid, question commitment to multilateral agreements. The U.S. is essentially maneuvering to maintain global dominance without overextension. In that sense, it must survive on a different battlefield, one of credibility, alliances, and strategic restraint. Conclusion. The story of 26 assassination attempts, one survivor is dramatic, likely an exaggeration in some tellings, but it captures the essence. Traoré's life and leadership are under siege. His battle is existential, punished by conspiracies, betrayal, foreign interference, and internal conflict. Yet, he survives. Not by chance, through strategic cunning, political resolve, and a message that resonates with many Africans weary of dependency. Meanwhile, the United States confronts a different but related struggle: how to assert global influence while a fracturing domestic order demands attention. Its role in Africa is shifting from patron to competitor, from benefactor to dealmaker. In these overlapping arenas, we see a collision of visions, one man seeking freedom for his people, one superpower positioning itself for the next century. Traoré's survival is not just about a country. It's symbolic of a larger fight for dignity, self-determination, and the power to chart one's own course without external sabotage. So when we hear numbers like 20 attempts, understand them as more than sensational details. They are warnings to others, signals of who really wields force, and testaments to what happens when a new generation of African leaders refuse to bow. In the end, the question is not merely, will Traoré survive the next attack? It is, will Africa and will the world let him, and the values he represents, define a new paradigm? Or will global interests ensure he is silenced? If you're watching this to the end, I leave you with this: freedom is not passive. Those who inhale the air of independence must fight for it. Whether in Ouagadougou or Washington, the battle for the spirit of nations never ends. Fade out with images of Traoré in public, citizens cheering, then fade to black with the title reappearing, 26 attempts, 1 survivor, the true story of Ibrahim Traoré's battle for freedom. If you found this story compelling, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell, because we will bring you more deep dives into stories shaping our world, both on the ground in Africa and at the epicenter of power in the US. Thank you for watching.